Chapter 9 of The Adventures of Bindle by Herbert Jenkins. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Recording by Don W. Jenkins. Chapter 9 The Letting of Number 6 1.
"And what am I to do if there's an air raid?" demanded Mrs. Bindle.
Bindle deliberately emptied his coffee cup, replaced it in its saucer, sat back further in his chair as a sign of repletion, then turned to Mrs. Bindle, who had been watching him with angry eyes.
"Well, there's always God and Mr. Gupperduck, Mrs. B," he remarked,
with the air of a man suggesting an unfailing source of inspiration.
"You always was a scoffer, you with your black art."
Mrs. Bindle's ire was rising, and her diction in consequence losing something of its customary precision.
"You know I ain't strong, and 'ow them guns and bombs frighten me."
There was in Mrs. Bindle's voice a note of entreaty.
"A daughter of the Lord didn't ought to be afraid of a nun. Besides, you can go round and old 'Earty's 'and. 'E's a rare old 'ero when there's guns goin' off." "I knew I shouldn't get any sympathy from you,"
complained Mrs. Bindle, rising and proceeding to bang away the breakfast things. When Mrs. Bindle was suffering from any great stress of emotion, she expressed her feelings by the noise she made. Ironing gave her the greatest opportunities. She could bang the iron on the ironing board, back again to the stand, and finally on to the stove.
"I gotta earn a living,"
remarked Bindle philosophically, as he proceeded to light his pipe.
"It's war time too, and nobody can't afford to move, so poor old Joe 'as to take any old job he can get 'old of." "You lorst your last job a purpose," snapped Mrs. Bindle.
Bindle looked at her sharply. Sometimes Mrs. Bindle's accuracy in things where she could not possibly possess knowledge was startling. Bindle had temporarily relinquished his situation in the removal department of Harridge's stores in order to become caretaker at Fulham Square Mansions, whilst his intimate, Charlie Hart, had a fortnight's holiday. Mrs. Hart had been ill, and the doctor said that change of air and scene were essential to her recovery. She could not go alone, and if Mr. Hart went with her and a substitute were obtained, he would in all probability, as Charlie put it, "pinch my bloomin' job." Bindle he knew he could trust, and so it came about that for a fortnight Bindle was to "sleep out."
"Well, you see," Bindle explained, "I couldn't disappoint old Charlie." "And what about me?" demanded Mrs. Bindle, looking round from a fierce attack upon the kitchen stove with the poker. "Well," said Bindle slowly, "you're a disappointed woman as it is, Mrs. B, so you ain't 'urt."
Mrs. Bindle resumed her attack upon the fire with increased vigour.
"You always was a selfish beast, Bindle," she retorted. "You'll be sorry when I'm dead."
Any reference by Mrs. Bindle to the remorse that he would suffer after her death, Bindle always regarded as a sort of take cover signal. Mrs. Bindle was hysterical, and Bindle liked to be well out of the way before the storm broke. He had heard, but had never had an opportunity of testing the statement, that without an audience dogs will not fight and women will never have hysterics. When therefore Mrs. Bindle referred to what Bindle widower would suffer on account of what Bindle Benedict had neglected to do, he rose, picking up the faded blue and white cricket cap he invariably wore, and walked towards the door. "There'll be a lot of tips, old Charlie says," he remarked, "and I'll buy you something. I'll run in every day to see you ain't gone off with Guppy." "You're a dirty-minded beast, Bindle," raged Mrs. Bindle, but her words beat up against the back door through which Bindle had vanished. He had become a master of strategical retreat. Whistling shrilly, he proceeded along the Fulham Road in the direction of Fulham Square Mansions. Bindle was in a happy frame of mind. It would be strange if a fortnight as porter at Fulham Square Mansions did not produce something in the way of a diversion. "Cheero, uncle!" The remark came from a brazen-faced girl waiting for a bus. Bindle frowned as he looked her up and down, from the low-cut transparent blouse to the short skirt reaching little below her knees. "If I was your uncle, young woman," he remarked, "I'd slap you into becomin' decent." The girl jumped on to a bus that had just drawn up, and with a swirl of skirt and wealth of limb, waved her hand as she climbed the stairs. "So long, old dear," she cried. "Got enough powder on her face to whitewash her feet," remarked a workman to Bindle as he resumed his walk. "Women is funny things," responded Bindle.
They never seems to be wearin' so little but what they can't leave orf a bit more." "You're right there, mate," replied the man, when he had digested the remark. "If I was the police, I'd run 'em in." "Well," said Bindle philosophically, "there is some wot likes to see all the goods in the window. S'long," and he turned off the Fulham Road, leaving the workman to pursue his journey, puzzling over Bindle's enigmatic utterance. "'Ullo, Charlie," greeted Bindle as he entered the porter's lodge of Fulham Square Mansions. "'Ere I am, come to take care of all the little birds in the nest wot you're a leavin' behind." Charlie Hart was a big man with a heavy moustache, a brow whereon the creases of worry had a perpetual abiding place, and an indeterminate chin. "Charlie ought to wear a beard," was Bindle's verdict. "Glad you come, Joe. I'll 'ave to go over things again. Train don't go till 4. During the next few hours Bindle was once more taken over the salient features of the life of a porter at a block of residential flats. Charlie Hart had no system or order in conveying his instructions, and Bindle saw that he would have to depend upon his own wits to meet such crises as arose. Mrs. Sedge, Mrs. Hart's mother, would look after those tenants who did not possess servants. "She's all right when she ain't after Royal Richard," explained Charlie Hart. "And who's Royal Richard?" enquired Bindle with interest. "Gin," was Charlie Hart's laconic response. Charlie enumerated the numbers of the flats, the occupants of which were to be "done for." One thing he particularly emphasised. Number 6 was temporarily vacant. The owner was away, but it was let furnished from the following Monday to Miss Cissie Boye, who was one of those to be "done for." Bindle was particularly cautioned to see that there were no carryings on, whereat he winked reassuringly. Mrs. Sedge was a stolid matron, whose outlook on life had reached the dregs of pessimism. "Oh, don't ask me," was the phrase with which she warded off any attempt at conversation. Hers was a soul dedicated to Royal Richard and silence. "Cheery little thing," was Bindle's summing up of the gloomy Mrs. Sedge. Bindle had not been in charge an hour before Number 7 began to get troublesome. He was a choleric ex-Indian civil servant. "Where's that damn fellow Hart?" he roared, thrusting his head into the porter's lodge. "He's gone to the damned seaside," replied Bindle imperturbably, as he proceeded to light his pipe with elaborate calm. "Takin' his damned wife with him," he added. Number 7 gasped. "And who the devil are you?" he demanded. "Well," replied Bindle with a grin, "on the 'alls I'm Little Titch, but 'ere I calls myself Joe Bindle, known only as 'Oly Joe." For a moment Number 7, his customary redness of face transformed to purple, stood regarding Bindle fiercely. "Then be damned to you," he burst out, and turning on his heel, dashed upstairs. "I ain't lived with Mrs. B 19 years without learnin' 'ow to 'andle explosives," remarked Bindle as he settled down to read an evening newspaper he had discovered in the letter box. Bindle soon discovered that the life of a porter at residential flats is strangely lacking in repose. Everybody seemed either to want something sent up, or came to complain that their instructions had not been carried out. The day passed with amazing rapidity. At 8 o'clock Bindle stepped round to the Ancient Earl for a glass of beer. When he returned at 9:30 he found his room in a state of siege. "Oh, here he is," said someone. Bindle smiled happily. "Where the devil have you been?" demanded Number 7 angrily. Bindle looked at him steadily. Having apparently established Number 7's identity to his entire satisfaction, he spoke. "Now look 'ere, sir, this is the second time to day I've 'ad to speak to you about your language. This ain't a peace meetin'. You speakin' like that before ladies too. I'm surprised at you. I am really. Now up it and learn some nice words, and then come back and beg prettily, and p'raps I'll give you a bit of cake." "You damned insolent fellow," thundered Number 7. "I'll report you. Look 'ere," remarked Bindle tranquilly. "If you ain't gone by the time I've finished lightin' this pipe," he struck a match deliberately, "I'll 'oof it myself, and then who'll fetch up all the coals in the mornin'?" This master stroke of strategy turned public opinion dead against Number 7, who retired amidst a murmur of disapproving voices. "It's 'ard if I can't go out to see a dyin' wife and child without 'im a-comin' usin' 'ot words like that," grumbled Bindle, as he proceeded to investigate the cases of the other tenants and their minions.
Number 1 was expecting a parcel. Had it arrived? No, it had not, but Bindle would not rest until it did. Number 12, a tall, melancholy visaged man, had lost Fluffles. Where did Bindle think she was? "P'raps she's taken up with another cove, sir," suggested Bindle sympathetically. "You never knows where you are with women." The maid from number 15 giggled. Number 12 explained in a weary tone that Fluffles was a Pekingese spaniel. "A dog, you say, sir?" cried Bindle. "Why didn't you say so before? I might have advertised for, well, I'll keep a look out." "What's that?" he enquired of the maid from number 8. "No coal? Can't fetch coal up after 6 o'clock. That's the rules," he added with decision.
"But we must have some. We can't go to bed without coal,"
snapped the girl, an undersized, shrewish little creature.
"Well, Queenie," responded Bindle imperturbably, "you'll 'ave to take some firewood to bed with you, if you wants company. Coal you don't get to night. What about a log?"
"My name's not Queenie," snapped the girl.
"Ain't it now?" remarked Bindle. "Shows your father and mother 'adn't an eye for the right thing, didn't it?"
"I tell you we must have coal," persisted the girl.
"Now look 'ere, Queenie, my dear, a gal as wants to take coal to bed with 'er ain't, she ain't respectable. Now orf you goes like a good gal."
"I'll get even with you yet, you red-nosed little bounder. I'll pay you."
"Funny where they learns it all," remarked Bindle to number 11, a quiet little old lady who wanted a postage stamp. The little lady smiled.
"She won't be wantin' coal in the next world if she goes on like that, will she, mum?"
said Bindle as he handed her the stamp.
"Her mistress has a weak heart," ventured number 11, "and during the raids she shivers so."
"Now ain't that jest like a woman, beggin' your pardon, mum. Why didn't Queenie say that instead of showin' 'ow bad she's been brought up? Right o, I'll take her up some coal."
10 minutes later Bindle surprised Queenie by appearing at the door of number 8 with a pailful of coal. She stared at him in surprise. Bindle grinned.
"'Ere you are, Queenie," he said cheerfully. "Now you'll be able to go to sleep with a bit in each, and maybe there'll be a bit over to put in your mouth."
"Look 'ere, don't you go callin' me Queenie. That ain't my name, so there."
And the girl banged the door in his face.
"She'll grow up jest like Mrs. B," murmured Bindle as he slowly descended the stairs. "An' p'raps she can't even cook. I wonder if she's religious. Sort o' zoo, this 'ere little 'ole. Shouldn't be surprised if things was to 'appen before ole Charlie gets 'ome again."
And Bindle returned to his lodge, where, removing his boots and throwing off his coat, he lay down on the couch that served as a bed for the porter at Fulham Square Mansions. During the next 2 days Bindle discovered that his duties were endless. Everybody seemed to want something, or have some complaint to make. He was expected to be always at his post, night and day, and if he were not, he was threatened with a possible complaint to the secretary of the company to which the flats belonged. Bindle's fertile brain, however, was not long in devising a means of relieving the monotony without compromising "poor old Charlie." He sent home for his special constable's uniform, although he had obtained a fortnight's leave on account of his work. Henceforth, whenever he required relaxation, he donned his official garb, which he found a sure defence against all complaints.
"Well, Queenie," he remarked one evening to the maid at number 8, "I'm orf to catch the robbers what might carry you away."
"I can see you catchin' a man,"
snorted the girl scornfully.
"Sorry I can't return the compliment, little love bird," retorted Bindle. "S'long."
Queenie had found her match. 2.
"You have a furnished flat to let?"
Bindle looked up from the paper he was reading. A timid, mouse-like little man, with side whiskers and a deprecating manner, stood on the threshold.
"Come in, sir," said Bindle heartily, "but I'm afraid it's let."
"But the board's up," replied the applicant.
Bindle rose, walked to the outer door, and there saw the notice board announcing that a furnished flat was to let.
"Funny me not noticin' that," he murmured to himself as he returned to the porter's lodge. "Was you wantin' it for long, sir?" he enquired.
"A month, I think," was the reply, "but 3 weeks."
"I'm sorry, sir," began Bindle. Then he smacked his leg with such suddenness that the stranger started back in alarm, his soft felt hat falling from his head and hanging behind him, attached to a hat guard. "Now isn't that jest like me?" cried Bindle, his face wreathed in smiles.
The stranger eyed Bindle nervously as he fumbled to retrieve the lost headgear, looking like a dog endeavouring to ascertain if he still possessed the tail. "I was thinking of the other one," said Bindle. "Yes, there's number 6 to let from next Monday."
What is the rent?
enquired the caller. Bindle, who had no idea of the rent of furnished flats, decided to temporise. "I'll go and ask, sir," he said. "What was you exactly wantin', and about wot figure?"
Well, a bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, kitchen, and attendance would do, was the reply. I do not want to pay more than 3½ guineas a week.
"Now ain't that funny?" cried Bindle, and without waiting to explain what was funny, he picked up the key of number 6 from his desk. "Now you jest come with me, sir, and I'll show you the very place you're wantin'." Number 6 consisted of 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, bathroom, and kitchen. Charlie Hart had taken Bindle over it, explaining that Miss Sissy Boy, who was entering into occupation on the following Monday, would use only the smaller bedroom with the single bed, therefore the double bedded room was to remain locked. The applicant, who introduced himself as Mr. Jabez Stiffson, expressed himself as quite satisfied with all he saw, and agreed to enter into possession on the following Monday afternoon, at a rental of 3½ guineas a week. He appeared mildly surprised at Bindle waiving the question of references and a deposit, but agreed that the smaller bedroom should be kept locked, as containing the owner's personal possessions. Mrs. Stiffson, he explained, was staying with friends in the country, their own house being let, but she would join him on the Tuesday morning. In the privacy of his own apartment, Bindle rubbed his hands with glee. "If this ain't goin' to be a little story for the Night Club," he murmured. "Well, put me down as a Cuthbert." He persuaded Mrs. Sedge to get both rooms ready, "in case of accidents," as he expressed it. Bindle foresaw that there might be some difficulty in the matter of catering for Mr. Jabez Stiffson, but he left that to the inspiration of the moment. He looked forward to Monday as a schoolboy looks forward to the summer holidays. He forgot to rebuke Queenie when she became impertinent. He allowed number 7 to swear with impunity. And he even forgot to don his special's uniform and go on duty. In short, he forgot everything save the all-absorbing topic of Miss Sissy Boy and Mr. Jabez Stiffson. On Monday, Mrs. Sedge was persuaded to take a half-day off. She announced her intention of putting some flowers on her husband's grave in Kilburn Cemetery. "Well," remarked Bindle, who knew that Mrs. Sedge's Kilburn Cemetery was the public bar of the ancient Earl, "you won't want no bus fares."
You go, Hein, with a nose like that,
retorted Mrs. Sedge, in no way displeased. "Well, don't be late in the morning," grinned Bindle. At 6:30 Mr. Jabez Stiffson arrived with a bewildering collection of impedimenta, ranging from a canary in a cage to a thermos flask. Bindle put all that he could in the double bedded room, the rest he managed to store in the kitchen. A slight difficulty arose over the canary. Mr. Stiffson suggested the dining room.
"Wouldn't he sort o' feel lonely without seein' you when he opened his little eyes?" questioned Bindle solicitously. "A cove I knew once 'ad a canary which 'ad a fit through bein' lonely, and they 'ad to throw water over 'im to bring 'im to, and then wot d'you think, sir?" Mr. Stiffson shook his head in mournful foreboding. "'E come to a sparrow, 'e did, really, sir." That settled the canary, who slept with Mr. Stiffson. It was nearly 8 before Mr. Stiffson was settled, and he announced his intention of going out to dine. At 10 he was ready for bed, having implored Bindle to see that he was up by 8, as Mrs. Stiffson would inevitably arrive at 10.
I'm a very heavy sleeper, he announced to Bindle's great relief. And my watch has stopped, he added. Some dirt must have got into the works. If Mrs. Stiffson were to arrive before I was up.
He did not venture to state what would be the probable consequence, but his manner implied that Mrs. Stiffson was a being of whom he stood in great awe. Just as Bindle was leaving for the night, Mr. Stiffson called him back.
"Porter, I'm worried about Oscar."
Bindle noticed that Mr. Stiffson's hands were moving nervously. "Are you really, sir?" enquired Bindle, wondering who Oscar might be.
"The bird, you know," continued Mr. Stiffson,
answering Bindle's unuttered question.
You don't think it will be unhygienic for him to sleep with me?"
"Sure of it, sir," replied Bindle, entirely at a loss as to Mr. Stiffson's meaning. Mr. Stiffson sighed his relief and bade Bindle good night, with a final exhortation as to waking him at 8.
"You know," he added, "I always sleep through air raids."
Mr. Stiffson's bugbear in life was lest he should oversleep. He seldom failed to wake of his own account, but constitutionally, lacking in self-reliance, he felt that at any moment he might commit the unpardonable sin of oversleeping. Bindle returned to his room to await the arrival of Miss Cissie Boye. It was nearly midnight when his alert ear caught the sound of a taxi drawing up outside. As he opened the outer door, Miss Cissie Boye appeared at the top of the stone steps. Bindle caught a glimpse of a dainty little creature in a long travelling coat with fur at the collar, cuffs and round the bottom, a small travelling hat and a thick veil.
"Oh, can you help with my luggage?" she cried.
"Right o, miss. You go in there and sit by the fire. We'll 'ave things right in a jiffy." And Bindle proceeded to tackle Miss Boye's luggage, which consisted of a large dress basket, a suit case and a bundle of rugs and umbrellas. When these had been placed in the hall and the taxi man paid, Bindle went into his lodge. Miss Boye was sitting before the fire, her coat thrown open and her veil thrown back. Between her dainty fingers she held a cigarette.
"So that's that," she cried. "I'm so tired, Mr. Porter."
Bindle regarded her with admiration. Honey coloured, fluffy hair, blue eyes, dark eyebrows and lashes, pretty petite features in a manner that suggested half baby, half woman of the world. Bindle found her wholly alluring. "I'm afraid we can't get that little picnic hamper of yours upstairs to night, miss," he remarked. Miss Boye laughed.
"Isn't it huge?" she cried. "It needn't go up till the morning. I've all I want in the suit case."
"You must have a rare lot of duds, miss," remarked Bindle.
"Duds?"
interrogated Miss Boye. "Clothes, miss," explained Bindle. Miss Boye laughed lightly. Miss Boye laughed at everything.
"Now I must go to bed. I've got a call to morrow at 11.
As they went upstairs, Bindle learnt quite a lot about Miss Boye, among other things that she was appearing in the revue at the Regent Theatre known as Kiss Me Quick, that she never ate suppers, that she took a warm bath every morning and liked coffee, bacon and eggs and strawberry jam for breakfast. "You'll be very quiet, miss, in the flat, won't you?" he whispered.
"Sure," replied Miss Boye.
"They're such a funny lot 'ere," he explained. "If a fly wakes up too early, or a bird 'as a nightmare, they comes down and complains next mornin'." Miss Boye laughed.
"Hush, miss, please,"
whispered Bindle as he switched on the electric light in the hall of number 6. Bindle showed the new tenant the sitting room, bathroom, kitchen and finally her own bedroom. "You will be quiet, miss, won't you?" Bindle interrogated anxiously, "or you may wake Oscar."
"Who's Oscar?"
queried Miss Boye.
"You'll see him in the mornin', miss," replied Bindle with a grin. "Good night, miss."
"Good night, Mr. Porter," smiled Miss Boye, and she closed the door.
"Now I wonder if anythink will 'appen before ole Whiskers gets up in the morning," mused Bindle as he descended the stairs to his room.
End of Chapter 9. Read by Don W. Jenkins, Rancho San Diego, California. shaggybark.blogspot.com